Hi, this is Emma.
This is Dalen.
I'm Eliza.
This is Anna.
This is Aspen.
This is McKenna.
I'm Blessing.
This is Maya.
I'm Morgan.
Thanks for listening to our student-led podcast on domestic violence and harm reduction tactics. Before starting our podcast, we wanted to let listeners know that we will be covering some intense topics such as domestic violence and various forms of abuse. So to start off our podcast, we really wanted to talk about domestic violence and kind of get that out there so people understand the signs and what they should be looking for and kind of focus on the harm reduction tactics for domestic violence. So to start, domestic violence is also known as intimate partner violence. It occurs between people in an intimate relationship. And it is a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. Domestic violence can come in many forms. It can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, psychological, technical actions, or threats of actions. Other patterns or coercive behaviors can also influence a person and can be considered as intimate partner violence. So this includes any behaviors to intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, or hurt someone. Abuse by a partner can happen to anyone, but domestic violence is most often seen as directed towards women. It is important to understand that domestic violence can happen in heterosexual and same-sex relationships, and it can really affect anyone. So looking at the types of abuse, there is physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, economic abuse, psychological abuse, and technological abuse. And it's really important to be able to recognize those. So to first start, physical abuse can include hitting, slapping, shoving, grabbing, pinching, biting, hair pulling, etc. It can also include denying a partner medical care or forcing substance use upon them. Sexual abuse includes coercing or attempting to coerce any sexual contact or behavior without consent. Sexual abuse includes, but is not limited to, marital rape, attacks on sexual parts of the body, forcing sex after physical violence has occurred, or treating one in a sexually demanding manner. Emotional abuse includes undermining an individual's sense of self-worth and or esteem. This may include constant criticism, diminishing one's abilities, name-calling, or damaging one's relationship with his or her children. Economic abuse includes controlling a person's ability to acquire, use, or maintain economic resources to which they are entitled. This includes using coercion, fraud, or manipulation to restrict a person's access to money, assets, credits, or financial information. Then we have psychological abuse, which includes causing fear by intimidation, threatening physical harm to oneself, partner, children, pets, or the partner's family or friends. This can include destruction of property and forcing isolation from family, friends, school, or work. Finally, we have technological abuse, which is an act or pattern of behavior that is intended to harm, threaten, control, stalk, harass, impersonate, exploit, extort, or monitor another person that occurs to be using any form of technology.
And most people don't realize how much domestic violence actually occurs. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the U.S. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. This includes slapping, shoving, and pushing. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence, beating, burning, and even strangling by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner during their lifetime to the point in which they feel very fearful or believed that they or someone close to them would be harmed or killed. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crimes. Only 34% of people who are injured by intimate partners received medical care for their injuries. As stated previously, abusive relationships always involve an imbalance of power and control. An abuser uses intimidating, hurtful words and behaviors to control a partner. It's not easy to see at the time, which is why it is important to know the behaviors before they happen. Some of these behaviors are calling you names, insulting you or putting you down, preventing or discouraging you from going to work, school, or seeing friends and family, trying to control how you spend money, where you go, what medicines you take, or even what you wear. They may act jealous and possessive or constantly accuse you of being unfaithful. They may get angry when drinking alcohol or using drugs or threaten you with violence or a weapon. Hitting, kicking, shoving, slapping, choking, and otherwise hurting you, your children, or your pets, and forcing you to have sex or engage in sexual acts against your will. They may blame you for his or her violent behavior or tell you that you deserve it. If you're in a same-sex relationship or bisexual or transgender, some signs may also include threatening to tell friends, family, or community members your sexual orientation or gender identity, telling you that authorities won't help you because of your sexuality or gender identity, and they may justify abuse by questioning your sexuality or gender identity. One may also see a cycle of abuse. This cycle involves your abuser threatening violence, your abuser striking, your abuser apologizing, promising to change, and offering gifts. The cycle just repeats itself.
It's also important to look at how domestic violence impacts the family unit. Sometimes domestic violence begins or increases during pregnancy. Domestic violence puts your health and the baby's health at risk. The danger continues after the baby is born. Even if your child isn't abused, witnessing domestic violence can be extremely harmful. Children who grow up in abusive homes are more likely to be abused and have behavioral problems than other children. As adults, they're more likely to become abusers or think abuse is a normal part of relationships. People might worry that telling the truth will further endanger them, their child, or their family members, and that it might break up the family. From there, it's really important to look into harm reduction tactics. So some of these should be prevention efforts, and their goal is to ultimately reduce the occurrence of domestic violence. This can be by promoting healthy, respectful, and nonviolent relationships, and can be promoted by addressing risk and protective factors. So it's important to create a safety plan. You can call a women's shelter or a domestic violence hotline for advice. Be sure to pack an emergency bag that includes the items you need when you leave. Be sure to bring extra clothes and keys, leave the bag in a safe place, and bring important personal papers, money, prescriptions, and other important documents such as passports, birth certificates, and social security cards. Know exactly where you go and how you'll get there. And be sure to identify a support network that can be trusted to carry out your plan. Psychoeducation about understanding and building healthy relationships is also crucial.
An important aspect of getting out of the situation itself is also to learn how to prevent it. This can be seen through teaching safe and healthy relationship skills, engaging influential adults and peers. That includes making bystander empowerment and education programs and family-based programs. You can also disrupt the developmental pathways towards partner violence by implementing parenting skills and family relationship programs. Another important thing is to support survivors to increase safety and lessen harms. Now that you know the facts, I'm going to transfer it over to Anna with policy.
Yes. So I had the Family Violence Prevention and Services Improvement Act of 2023. And before I begin with providing you guys with the purpose of this bill, I would just like to give you all history context of this. So the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act, also abbreviated as FVPSA, was the federal government's first response to the crisis of domestic violence. It is administered by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It is the only federal funding source dedicated to providing support to domestic violence shelters and programs. And it was first signed into law in 1984. However, Representative Lucy McBeth wanted to make enhancements to this specific bill, which was reintroduced on April 13, 2023. There are 7 specific enhancements, but the top one that she focuses on is just reauthorizing and expanding funding for programs focusing on supporting survivors, families, and domestic violence. So how does this impact potential clients? This bill can impact and also affect this population for positively. The reason being is because within the bill, it says that the survivors receive services such as emergency shelters, crisis counseling, safety planning, and assistance recovering from financial abuse and addressing housing insecurity. And I also feel like it's important to highlight that it has a portion in the bill where it discusses children who are also being affected, so they are trying to implement programs. So it also helps all ages, which is also great because oftentimes individuals aren't really focused on the children who are affected. They're more so focused on the older adults.
All right, and then we also wanted to talk about Senate Bill 158. This one is a bill that has 3 main portions to it. The first one is pretty straightforward. It says that if a person is arrested for domestic violence, domestic battery, rape, sexual battery, stalking, stuff like that, they cannot be released on bail for at least 24 hours since the arrest. The next portion discusses about how if a person violates certain, or both on purpose or knowing that they are violating these acts, such as a protective order for domestic or family violence. This includes emergency orders where it seems that the defendant could be threatening or planning to do something against the plaintiff's rights or before, I believe. Also, workplace violence restraining orders or a no-contact order, including those involving a child receiving help or a child considered a delinquent, and also those set as conditions of a pretrial release or probation, or a similar order in a different state. This then considers that act an invasion of privacy, and it can be classified as a Class A misdemeanor, or it can be considered a Class 6 felony if they have been convicted of something similar in a different unrelated incident before, or if they have been stalking. Additionally, it also goes over that if a sex offender lives or moves in or even intends to live within a mile of their victim, and they knew or had resources or just the knowledge that they would be residing within the 1 mile radius of the victim, then it would also be considered a Class A misdemeanor or a Class 6 felony if they have been convicted of something similar in an unrelated incident before. I do want to say the difference between a Class A misdemeanor and a Class 6 felony. Class A misdemeanor just can have jail time for up to a year and a fine of up to $5,000, while a Class 6 felony is the lowest and less severe felony and can have a jail time of anywhere between 6 months up to 2.5 years and a fine of up to $10,000.
Okay, hi guys, it's McKenna. I'm going to start off our conversation about resources that are available, and I'm actually going to start off by mentioning Heather's Law, which is Indiana's teen dating violence prevention legislation. Just a little background information. Heather's Law is named after Heather Norris, who was brutally murdered by her high school boyfriend in 2007, and then in 2010, the governor of Indiana at the time signed Senate Enrolled Act 316, Heather's Law. It requires the Indiana Department of Education to work in collaboration with advocates to compile a toolkit of teen dating violence prevention curriculum and policy recommendations for grades 6 through 12. But unfortunately, even though that this is set up, the adoption of these resources is completely optional. So that means schools don't have to teach their students about dating violence and how to prevent and to look out for the signs, which I think is very unfortunate, because as we know, dating violence does not only affect a certain group of people or a certain age, and it's very important that we protect our youth and make sure that we're looking out for them and making sure their parents can also look out for them. But with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Morgan so she can tell you more about other resources.
Yeah, McKenna, thank you for starting off the topic on resources. As my peers before me have discussed, domestic violence is a prominent social issue across the country, emphasizing the importance of local and community resources such as those we have and will continue to discuss throughout this podcast. The Monroe County Domestic Violence Coalition is a local affiliation dedicated to improving the community's response to domestic violence through the communication and coordination of services. The coalition has held many projects across the county, including Domestic Violence Awareness Conference, which is held every other spring. The conference implements and monitors audits of our community's response to domestic violence. There are over a dozen different organizations currently recognized as members of the coalition, including but not limited to Centerstone, the City of Bloomington Police Department, the City of Bloomington Safe and City program, as well as Middleway House, which Aspen will discuss following my discussion. To view more information about what these organizations do, as well as additional members of the MCDVC, please visit the list of resources which we compiled attached to this project. To all interested listeners, the coalition holds community meetings every third Friday of the month. More information on this is also linked in the podcast description. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass the conversation over to Aspen to talk about Middleway House.
All right, so Middleway House is one of Monroe County's biggest providers of domestic violence help. A couple of the things that they provide, but not a limited list, is providing emergency shelter, a 24/7 crisis support hotline, an on-scene advocacy program, transitional housing, permanent housing, legal advocacy, support groups, and even more than this. Their emergency shelter is called New Wings. This shelter is for the counties of Monroe, Greene, Lawrence, Owen, Morgan, and Martin? Something like that. This shelter is for those currently unsafe due to violence. This shelter has at least 30 beds for survivors and their children. Survivors and their children will be put into one room together, and individuals seeking help will be placed with up to 3 other survivors. This is not a long-term solution, but it is a critical step for many to take so that they can feel safe when making long-term decisions. Their transitional housing is called The Rise. It is for survivors and their children who are transitioning out of violent relationships. And transitional housing refers to a supportive yet temporary type of accommodation that is meant to bridge the gap between homelessness or violence and permanent housing. The Rise has 28 2 to 3 bedroom apartments fully equipped with appliances, and furnishings are available on a first-come, first-served kind of basis. The cost of housing is based on how much the survivor is able to pay. There's on-site programming, such as tutoring support for a GED and college coursework, financial education and resume assistance, and practice interviews. Being able to access safe and affordable housing is often a big barrier to survivors of violence. The Rise has served over 452 families in the last 20 years. There are also other support groups and prevention programs that Middleway House runs. A couple of these are, let me look real quick. The Adolescent and Teen Survivors of Sexual Violence Support Group. This is run in conjunction with the Bloomington Center for Connection. And they do intakes on a bi-weekly basis for joining this group, and this group may or may not require caregiver consent. And for prevention programs, There are campus and community-based adult sexual and dating violence prevention programming. They provide adult-oriented prevention education. These have been implemented in IU classes, addictions groups, mental health groups, and with incarcerated individuals, and so many more. If you are interested in having prevention programming on your campus or in your community group, contact Lindsay Badger at prevention@middlewayhouse.org. And with that, I'm going to toss this to Maya for our call to action.
Thanks, Aspen. Yeah, moving right along for the call to action, I'm just going to be discussing the power and control wheel that is within abuse. In any case of abuse, there is a power and control wheel. And it starts out in the honeymoon phase, which every relationship actually goes through. And then after that comes tension, explosion, and the last is the promises phase. With the honeymoon phase, there is love. It's new, it's exciting. There may even be a little obsession over the new relationship. And it's just no one's really recognizing any of the potential signs of abuse since the relationship is so new and exciting. In the tension stage, the relationship will grow to be on edge, and one partner may be more scared to be around the other due to some tense behavior. And it's also kind of hard, to recognize that in that stage. Next is the explosion phase. This is where the abuse happens and it all unravels. And like my peers talked about earlier, there is many forms of abuse, and it's really important to be educated on all those so you know if you're in the cycle or not. The last phase is promises, and the abuser will promise that it probably will never happen again, or make excuses for the situation, or buy gifts to make light of what happened and reassure that it won't happen again. Abuse is about control, and looking for signs of domestic violence within the wheel are vital for safety. If you find yourself within this cycle or someone you know, please seek help and make sure you and your loved ones are safe. And remember that anyone who is a survivor of domestic abuse or any other kinds of abuse is never the one to blame. And with that said, I'm going to pass it on to Blessing.
Yes, thank you, Maya, and I'm Blessing. So I will be talking about call to action within in the agency or the school or like your workplace and if you are someone that's looking to work at an agency or schools or somewhere where there's help providing to other people. So in this kind of setting, things that you can have is having a healthy relationship program where it is focused on social emotional learning, and also create a protective environment by improving school climate and or the workplace climate and safety, improving organizational policies in workplaces or physical and social emotional for neighbors. And also you can also have a support, you can also do stuff to support survivors by having programs or services like victim center services, housing programs, first responder and civil legal protections, patient center approaches or treatment depending on their situation. And these are some of the ideas that you can implement within your agency or within future stuff that you want to focus on. And these programs and services don't have to be somewhere related to domestic violence or anything. It can just be something to protect yourself that you can make it for yourself and your students or like your coworkers and colleagues. And that's some of the ideas or implementation that you can go to. And thank you for listening to our podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening to our podcast. To see our references, or if you simply want to look or simply want to learn more, look below at our video's description. Thank you.
Thank you.